Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Bleh, I can talk. Anyways, this is another one of the inks that y'all voted for when I asked what ones you wanted to see before I left on my trip. And this is also the only of those Herbin's, anniversary inks that I have. It is, of course, Rouge Hematite. You can see where all the glitter is separated down at the bottom. Yeah, and I don't know if this happened to anyone else, but the first time I tried to screw the cap back on, even before it was all the way screwed on, the wax broke. So, yeah. Now, all the tests were done in this Laban. I have no idea what it is. I was given this as a present, and this is the exact kind of pen I would never buy for myself. But, hey, free pen, right? So, it's a pretty fine nib, but it's an unmarked nib. The box it was in did not say, so I am calling it a fine because it's right on line with most of my fine nibs. Rouge Hematite. I'd say this is probably the most well-known of the anniversary inks. I'm not sure, but I think it was the first one that was really designed for sheen. The original Blue Ocean didn't sheen, if I recall. Stormy Gray came out next, then they redid Ocean for sheen, and then, Emerald of Chivor came out recently. But yeah, so this is the first of those really, like, sheeny McSheen sheen inks. So, thought I'd compare it to some other Herbin inks. Down here we have Rose Cyclamen, Rouge Caroubier, Rose Rouge, which is their rose-scented, I think it's just Rouge Opera ink that's scented with roses. And then Rouge Hematite up at the top, where you can see some of that intense goldiness in there. And, yeah, did some water tests. So, also compared to some other inks much earlier on, here's Rouge Hematite down at the bottom, still lots of sheeny goodness. Diamine Red Dragon, Diatramentus Carmine Red, Gentle Grenade, which also has some sheen going on in it. But sort of more of a pomegranate juice color down there. Rose Rouge by Herbin, Diamine Oxblood, Diatramentus Scented Orchids, Noodler's Red Eel, Schaefer Script Red, which is probably the most red I've ever seen, like it's the most genuine straight red. Let's see, Diatramentus Oriental Red, and Noodler's Nikita, which when it was laid on this thick, you do get just the tiniest bit of sheen. But anyways, so let's look at the chromatography. Oh yeah, it's 1670 anniversary, who be whatted, I don't know. So, that's the full name of the ink that I cannot ever remember. As you can see, there is sort of this, like, gray down at the bottom where the ink was initially put, and I don't know if I'll be able to get it on camera, but some of that glitter is still down there. But all of the actual color part of the ink washed up. As you can see, it definitely has some pink in it, but it doesn't get any darker than just a straight true red. And I let it dry, where the results are pretty much the same. There's just sort of more of that gray glitter down at the bottom. Top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Now, it does look like a very genuine true red on here, which is nice because I do enjoy my reds. And definitely here in the scribble, you can see lots of that gold sheen going on in there, and it's all through the writing as well. However, since this is a very fine nib and there's a lot of particles in this ink, it was really not wanting to go through the feed. This is a very moderate fine nib, so I imagine the channel in the feed to keep up with a nib that size is not very wide. So having all that particle, like trying to get through that channel, it was probably causing the ink equivalent of a traffic jam. So, yeah, it was really hard trying to get it out of the nib. However, the red itself, even without the sheen, is a very pleasant color. It did smear really easily. It took a couple of days, I'd say like at least 2 days before I could like pick this up and handle it without it smearing under my fingers. So that was a bit odd. But yeah, it also makes a mess because part of what makes that sheen is just so much stuff that's sitting on top of the paper after the ink dries. And so when you add more water, that's kind of what happens. But yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, so in that regard it's very well behaved. It is a little hard to get it out of the nib though, unless you have something that's a bit broader or a bit wetter. Here's Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where again there's just sheen everywhere. As I say, actually here, the Gryffindor in me heartily approves of this combination of red and gold. It's a combination I definitely like. Now, 12 seconds to dry on both papers so far. There is just sheen all over the place. It's everywhere. But yeah, I mean, it's a really intense red. And then the sheen, like when it catches the light. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread. There's no echo. In that regard, it's all very well behaved. However, the water test is a bit of a disaster. You can see where the initial stuff was, but there's a huge mess in there. Next is Tomoe River Paper, where, as you would probably expect from this paper, there is just like the whole thing is just gold. But also because this paper is so slick, you know, it's so smooth that I had even more of that problem where it would smear if I would touch it. And that was just from me kind of like trying to hold the paper as I was trying to continue writing the test. And that happened just all over the place. It just smeared so much that made it difficult to hold on to it as I was trying to like write further down the page, because like I was trying to hold it from the bottom, but then as I'm getting to the bottom, there's less to hold on to. So that was a bit of a problem. And then like as I was trying to, you know, get more ink into the feed so I could keep writing, you know, I was twisting the converter trying to get more ink down there. A blob came right out, landed on the paper. I blacked it out with some carbon-based ink, and so that's why I said there's no bleed, asterisk, because that did happen. So within reason, there's no bleed. However, this is very thin paper, so, I mean, echo is always something that's to taste, but something to be aware of. Yeah, this paper loves to let ink slide away when you add more water, and that's definitely what happened here. In fact, the camera's picking that up much better than the naked eye can. However, luckily when I was sort of dabbing it with a towel, it left much less of a puddle as we saw in the other inks, or other papers. Now this is, I've had this test for a while. I've been holding on to it for, God, probably at least 6 months now. So this is some of that slightly nicer than I've had recently paper, but it's still not fantastic. As you can see, there definitely was some spread. The line width got a good bit broader. Oh, on here, on the Tomoe River, the dry time was 14 seconds. On here it was 7. And here you can still see, possibly if I hold it just right, there's a little bit of a glitter in there, but it looks more like those old Japanese glitter pens that were popular like in the late 1990s. But yeah, there's none of that really obvious sheen. In fact, it looks almost like, it almost looks more like this, where there's just that little bit of glitter down at the bottom. It's not as obvious, but yeah. This is how you can tell this isn't some of the world's worst copier paper, because there's no bleed. There is a little tiny bit of echo, but yeah, it's mostly just spread. There's really not any feathering. The sheen is really gone. The color is kind of nice, however, it does take on a slightly pinkishness to it, but still a red, I'd say. Huge mess. Because the paper's more absorbent, it was harder to wash all of it out, so there is more of that clear center, but there is plenty of feathering and spread. Or sorry, just mess, puddle. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where again, it mostly just looks like a red ink, and you have just the tiniest little bits of glitter in there, like those little gel pens. You do get a bit of shading, but not a whole lot. It's still a very straight red. Took 6 seconds to dry on here. Yeah, still, like, almost no bleed at all. There's, like, I mean, that's mostly just from the sheer brightness of the light this is under. In that regard, really well behaved so far. Still a bit of spread, like if we compare it to the fancier papers, the line width did sort of increase a little, but not as much as it did on the copier paper. Very well done so far. Again, did create a big mess when trying to do the water test, and it did explode a bit in some places, but if your life depended on recovering that, you probably could. Now, lastly is Moleskin Notebook Paper. However, this is some of that freakishly well-behaved paper, so many caveats, many grains of salt taken with this, because as you can see here, there's no bleed, there's no feather, there's no spread, there's still some sheen, and I really can't guarantee these results. In fact, I highly doubt it. However, I haven't used this ink much, as you can tell, like from the bottle, there's not that much missing, just because it can be such a labor to try and get it to come out of the nib that I sort of really have to be in the mood for exactly this ink to use it. So I can't tell you how it would perform on more modern Moleskine paper. But, yeah. So sheeny, just so sheeny. Which, obviously, after the success of this ink, Herbin really sort of hopped on the bandwagon, because after that there was just lots of anniversary inks all the time. I think if I were going to buy one of those inks, this would still be the ink that I would buy. I do enjoy that combination of red and gold. Yeah, so there you go. It's a red ink unlike anything else I have, that's for darn sure. Put it in a wet pen, definitely. Put it in a pen whose feed can handle having this much, you know, like saturation particles in it. And, yeah, keep it on the fancy paper, even though actually on the cheap papers it did pretty well. Not bad. For your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.